Tiger Stadium begins at 6:30 Central. So for my partner, the Whimperoo, Tom Pritchard, our producer, the wrecker, Skip Ellison, this is Ken Harrelson. So long, everybody.
A respected businessman, a friendly neighbor, a happy-faced clown, a cold-blooded killer.
I'll kill you too, do you understand? I'll kill you.
The true story of John Wayne Gacy and the cop who brought him to justice.
I don't want that man free to hurt anyone anymore.
A serial killer with 33 victims.
She's been getting away with this for a long, long time.
A psychic with a vision.
People who know Gacy are concerned that you might be going after the wrong man.
A skeptical district attorney.
Other boys are dead.
And one cop with just a hunch.
He won't find a thing.
Brian Dennehy, Margot Kidder, Meg Foster, and introducing Michael Riley as the cop who will stop at nothing.
Don't you have nightmares, Mr. Gacy?
Oh, Mr. Policeman. Don't you know a clown can get away with murder?
To catch a killer.
Coming May 18th to Channel 9.
Introducing tire foam from Armor All. One spray, and even old tires look great. Kind of makes you wish we made car foam, doesn't it? New tire foam from Armor All. Just spray, walk away.
Do you have what it takes to party with Freddy? Nightmare 4, The Dream Master. Wednesday night at 11:30 on Channel 9. Chicago's very own 9 o'clock news.
20,000 gallons of water a minute being pumped out of the flooded freight tunnels and basements beneath Chicago's Loop. That is until tonight. Now engineers are cutting back just to stay on the safe side. Water level has been going down about 3 inches an hour. That is being changed, though, tonight. Good evening. I'm Rick Rosenthal.
And I'm Joanie. Allison Payne has the night off. Only one pump will be left on at each of the 3 pumping sites starting overnight. Officials say they're concerned about equalizing the pressure in the tunnels and sub-basements of flooded buildings. Jim Ramsey is at one of the pump sites tonight at Grand and the Chicago River and joins us now with this update. Jim?
Joanie, thank you very much. One of the most interesting developments tonight in this story has been the revision in the estimate of the amount of water still in that tunnel system. You may remember, but back when this crisis began, it was estimated that somewhere around 250 million gallons of water was in that system. But that figure has since been revised upward, and engineers now believe that tunnel may contain 350 million gallons of water. Nonetheless, the pumping activity has been continuing all day. Today from 3 sites instead of 2, as was the case on Monday. And I'm standing at the location of the latest site, a Grand Avenue site. I'm at the Grand Avenue Bridge at the Chicago River. And with the addition of this site, the water level in the tunnel system was said to be dropping throughout the day at a rate of 3 inches per hour.
At this location, we have 3 pumps online. They're pumping about 6,500 gallons per minute. We intend to put 1 more pump online shortly and maybe increase that to 10,000 gallons per minute.
With pumps going at 3 locations, more than 20,000 gallons of water was being drawn out of the flooded tunnel system every minute. Since Monday, a 3rd pumping site was added at Grand Avenue and the Chicago River. Here, 3 pumps were accounting for 6,500 gallons of water per minute, until a 4th pump was added during the afternoon. But the Army Corps is decreasing the amount of water being pumped to give the water in the tunnel system a chance to stabilize. After the Corps evaluates the operation, a higher volume of pumping is expected to resume.
We will start bringing the pumps down one at a time, probably down to at least operating one pump at each site. We may throttle it back even more just to see how the system is reacting. We'll be able to give a better assessment tomorrow morning or tomorrow at noon when we've been able to get some monitoring results back. What we really want to try to do is to see how much of the system loss is being created, and also at the same time, really the more important thing is try to equalize the stresses and equalize the pressures in the system.
Construction at the Kenzie Bridge continues as workers focus on the building of new shafts needed to measure water flow. The news from the bridge remains good, but John Kenny of Kenny Construction says the crisis is not over. After all, the plugs placed in the tunnel are only temporary.
Everybody, I think, gets the impression that this thing is over with right now. It's far from over. I don't want anybody to think that something couldn't happen over there right now, because what we've got in, I emphasize the word temporary. They're very temporary plugs. When we put in a permanent plug, it will be a permanent plug.
Returning to the pumping operation, it may seem strange to reduce the pump flow from some 20,000 gallons of water per minute to about 3,000 to 5,000 gallons of water per minute. But the engineers have a very good reasons for doing that. For one, they wanted to check the natural seepage rate in the tunnel. Before this crisis began, you may remember, or at least before the pumping in the crisis began, natural seepage in the tunnel was measured at about 1 inch per hour. They want to check and see if that figure needs to be revised upward or downward. They also want to check the water pressure and flow in the tunnel. This will allow engineers an opportunity to make some refinements in their computer models that they're using to help determine the efficiency of this whole operation. And thirdly, they wanted a chance to check that temporary plug in the river at the Kenzie Bridge. Well, as late as 9 o'clock, I talked to the Corps of Engineers and was told that a core sample has in fact been taken, and that plug is holding. There will be a meeting tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., at which time a decision will be announced as to whether to once again increase the rate of the pumping. Rick and Joanie, back to you.
So, Jim, how does this all fit into the 12-day estimate that the Corps of Engineers had given at the beginning of this project?
One of the big justifications for wanting to reduce the pump flow, Joanie, has to do with possibly making some revisions to that 12-day estimate. Once they have an idea what the natural seepage rate is in the tunnel and perhaps how far off their computer models were, they'll be better able to revise that estimate. So that's something we'll watch for closely tomorrow.
All right. Thank you, Jim Ramsey.
Reporting live from that pump site at Grand and the Chicago River. Well, work crews, of course, have been monitoring the dewatering process all over the loop at those pump sites and in the basements of at least 18 buildings downtown. Water levels were dropping most of the day today, as Jim told you, at a rate of about 3 inches an hour, enough to now give more engineers in more buildings a chance to survey the damage and begin the tough task of drying, cleaning, and repairing equipment in their basements. The city gave some buildings permission to join the pumping effort, and contractors today wasted no time revving up their motors.
We have a pump here that's capable of pumping a couple of thousand gallons per minute, but I don't think the sewers will be able to stand that capacity, so we'll be running at half or a little better.
The problem is a little more complicated at DePaul University, where pipes are covered with asbestos. Contractors are now going to work to remove that asbestos first before the rest of the cleanup work can be completed at DePaul. Elsewhere around the loop, more stores reopened today, some displaying flood sale signs trying to regain lost business. 11 buildings in the loop are still without electric power. The Small Business Administration says about 200 businesses have so far applied for flood-related loans in the past week.
While the water is slowly going down, the cost of the Great Chicago Flood is going up. Estimates now range from $1 to $1.5 billion. And that has Mayor Daley and Governor Edgar at odds about who's going to pay. Jim Williams has more.
Mayor Daley toured the reopened Chicago Board of Trade, highlighting the progress being made to clean up and regroup after the Great Flood. The city is indeed recovering, but storm clouds hover over the aftermath. While the federal government is set to pay 75% of the city's cleanup costs, there is a dispute over who should pick up the remaining 25%. Daley wants the city and state to split it, but Governor Edgar won't commit to that in light of the state's financial crisis and the possibility of costly lawsuits facing the city.
The city admitted that, they were at error in not taking care of that problem, and I'm not sure, I haven't got a legal opinion to know yet what the fiscal ramification of that statement could be and what that would mean if we were providing them equal assistance to what their costs might be.
What you're saying is then Chicago has to pick off 25%. It's not just the citizens of Chicago, it's all the business. And so it's really unfair, and I don't think Chicago should be treated that way.
Then there are questions about the city's investigation of who is responsible for the conditions that led to the flood. The city's lawyer, Kelly Welsh, is conducting the probe. Some aldermen say an independent investigator ought to be brought in, someone with no ties to the Daley administration.
There are other outside agencies that can always come in and handle the investigation or have an investigation. And I'm sure that before this is all over, they will do it. My concern, certainly they should.
But Alderman Ed Burke supports Welsh, saying it is Welsh who, in the end, will have to protect the city's taxpayers.
And it's not the Corporation Council's role at this point, in my humble opinion, to lay the taxpayers bare to the potential of huge liability.
This presents a challenge for the Daley administration. It has to get to the bottom of the matter while not leaving the city vulnerable to a slew of expensive lawsuits. Jim Williams, WGN News.
The White House says Vice President Dan Quayle will tour the flood site Thursday with Mayor Daley. Daley and Quayle are expected to talk about increasing the amount of federal disaster assistance.
More motorists returned to the Kennedy Expressway today despite delays because of construction and the flooding. The Illinois Department of Transportation reports heavy traffic during both the morning and afternoon rush hours. Yesterday, traffic on the Kennedy was about 30% below normal. More folks came back today. The biggest backups are occurring at Hubbard's Cave, where 2 lanes are closed in each direction because of the threat of flooding in that low-lying area. That threat has diminished but still remains. State transportation officials are continuing to urge motorists to avoid the Kennedy by using alternate routes or by taking public transportation. Water samples taken from some of the flooded basements in the Loop show there is not any health risk due to contamination. City Environment Commissioner Henry Henderson says there was a lot of concern about highly toxic PCBs being found in flooded basements. PCBs, as you know, are used in electrical transformers, some of which were totally submerged in some building basements. However, Henderson says sample tests show no PCBs or unusually high levels of bacteria either.
The PCBs, for instance, are not even in detectable levels. There's no indication of PCBs in the water column at all. There's bacteria in the water. It's essentially the same as what you have in the river itself.
Henderson also says the results of water samples depend on which basement they were taken from and what might have been stored in those basements, things such as janitorial cleaning supplies.
Still to come, another case of meningitis reported at the University of Illinois.
And anti-abortion activists pick up efforts to try to close down abortion clinics in Buffalo, New York.
And in the weather office, we've switched back to winter vocabulary. An unseasonably cold air mass taking hold for the next 24 hours. Flakes of snow possible. We'll have details coming up.
Every year, 10 million third world children don't live to see their 3rd birthday, and another 5 million will be gone before their 5th birthday. Those that do live beyond that ripe old age for this part of the world will grow up in dung heaps like this. Happy birthday. I've been asked if, after witnessing this god-awful misery for the last 17 years, have I finally gotten used to this? Used to this? How can a human being with eyes and ears and a heart get used to this? The vile odor of a place without sanitation where hundreds of children use the same roadside ditch for a toilet. The heartbreaking crying of a 2-year-old so undernourished her teeth are coming in. The sight of a child so starved he's too weak to cry. And one so dehydrated by diarrhea he doesn't even have the tears to cry with. It's enough to make the angels cry. Now, I can't get used to this any more than you could, but we can get rid of it. Yes, we can. You and I and CCF. I've given 17 years of my life to child care, and I'll give 100 more. But all you have to give is 70 cents a day, and the time it takes to make one free phone call. Your 70 cents will put one of these otherwise doomed boys or girls into a clean and bright CCF daycare center. Put life-giving medicine into a dying little body, nourishing food into a little stomach, education into an impoverished little mind. And if you call CCF right now, you'll get something that's good for your heart. A thank you letter right from the heart of the child your 70 cents is taking care of. A letter that says something like, "Dear friend, I was very sick and could not get out of my bed. But now I am back in school again, so there will be many more letters to you. Can you think of a better reason to call CCF right now than the chance to give some child the best birthday gift of all? A life of many, many more birthdays. Right, Helen?
A University of Illinois student has contracted potentially deadly and highly contagious meningitis, even though she was immunized for the disease earlier this year. The victim, sophomore Robin Troop of West Suburban Wheaton, is in serious condition tonight at a hospital in Urbana. She was one of about 18,000 students who were immunized after 7 students became ill with meningococcal disease in February. 2 U of I students died from meningitis last year. University officials say Troop is the first student known to have contracted the disease since the immunization program began. The Center for Disease Control says the immunization for meningitis does not work for everyone and is effective between 85 to 95% of the time.
California death row inmate Robert Alton Harris finally lost his 13-year battle to avoid the death penalty. Harris was put to death early this morning for the 1978 murders of 2 San Diego teenagers. In his last hours, the U.S. Supreme Court rejected 4 lower court stays of execution. One of those stays had come after Harris had actually been strapped into the execution chair. His case sparked widespread debate over whether Harris would suffer in the gas chamber.
It seemed to me to take a long time between the time that they closed that big oval door at 6:01, according to most of our figures, and the time he was pronounced dead at 6:21. That tells me it took him 20 minutes to die.
Harris is the first convict to be put to death in California in 25 years.
The U.S. Supreme Court will once again battle over the sensitive issue of abortion. The justices tomorrow will hear arguments over a Pennsylvania law that makes it more difficult to obtain an abortion. Meanwhile, Buffalo, New York is the latest battleground for the sometimes militant anti-abortion group Operation Rescue. The group today increased efforts aimed at shutting down Buffalo's women's clinics that offer abortions. The protesters were met by equally vocal abortion rights activists. There were no clashes, but police did arrest 2 people. One of those arrested was a clergyman who thrust a fetus in the faces of pro-choice demonstrators.
Defense Secretary Dick Cheney today announced plans for what is to happen now to Fort Sheridan when that Army base closes in 1993. 728 acres of prime lakeshore property is involved. A new veteran cemetery will be built on the north end. Housing on the south end will be used for Navy families from Great Lakes. A small 10-acre strip along Sheridan Road in Highwood would be sold for light commercial development, and the rest of Fort Sheridan will be made available for purchase by some local governmental entity to be preserved as open space.
The Bulls, minus Michael Jordan, start practice for the playoffs.
And the Cubs relief staff fails to get the job done. Rich King is next with all this day's news and sports.
Wow, I feel good. What is self-esteem?